I get it back into the routine. We are expecting Emily, but we do have a quorum, so we could start.
And I think I heard Emily say I'm here.
I am
Oh,
here.
there she is.
All right, there she is. All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to see you on this sunny June day. Ellen, do you need to take attendance before we jump in?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll call the committee members who are the voting committee members for this meeting. It is the previous committee roster, not the new roster. So just so everyone understands. So the trustee committee members, Trustee Kane.
Here.
Trustee Dobson.
Here.
Trustee Donnelly. I did not see Trustee Donnelly. Trustee Ames.
Yes, here.
Trustee Cates.
Here.
Trustee McMahon.
Here.
And I don't believe Commissioner Macon can make it today. Trustee Mishu.
Present.
Trustee Riley.
Here.
We do have other trustees joining that are not committee members. We have Barbara Alexander and Donna Lauren. I think that's everyone.
Well, thank you, Ellen. Let me take a moment and welcome Barbara Alexander and Donna Loring to the ASA. I know you will not be voting today, but it's great to have you here at the meeting and on the board. Appreciate it. I didn't get permission to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Ellen's looking scared. So this is my last meeting as ASA chair, and I'm turning the reins over to David for the next meeting. So looking forward to that. To David, he'll do a great job. Thank you, David, for agreeing to do it. So the tab 1 is, are there any faculty? I see Lisa is here. I don't know. Is there anything that
There's a
anyone?
few of us here. William from Machias is here. Patrick from UMA is here. Clyde from UMF. I'm just scrolling through. Am I missing any other of my faculty colleagues?
And does anyone have anything that they would like to say?
Well, I'll start.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, Robert, did you have something to say?
Well, if you don't mind,
Sure, go ahead.
Since Lisa brought it up first, I did want to offer my sincere thanks to her for all of her service. It's made my work incredibly meaningful and productive. We've gotten quite a bit done together through this committee. I mentioned to her that we have approved over 50 programs together, that all of those programs of which are doing quite well, even in difficult times. So really didn't want her to go away before we all took a moment to thank her. And she's been a great leader for us.
Thank you, Robert. And truth be told, I'm not going away, right? As vice chair, I just get to be on every committee. At least that's what Trish told me I have to do. I don't know. So, well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's a great committee. So thank you. Thank you. Faculty, anybody have anything? I think, did I see?
Was Lisa.
Yeah, I was going to speak for a minute. Also, if Patrick or William or Clyde want to add anything, I will say, we are meeting with you, Vice Chair Eames, as well as Chair Riley on Friday. So thank you for that invitation. Michael's
Excuse
here
me,
as well.
Lisa, somebody needs to mute if they would, please. All right, thank you.
I think it was Michael Scott, which is another faculty rep that's here as well. So
Okay.
we met internally last week as reps, so we do have some things to talk about this Friday, so we're excited for that conversation. Most of you probably know, heard, and maybe have feelings about my comments at citizens' comment at our last board meeting. And I felt pretty strongly about the fact that even though we have a standing agenda item here, sometimes we don't feel like we're really heard or given the opportunity. So we're hoping that both here and at the full board meeting that can change. But I do, in the interest of full disclosure, want to tell you that, it seems, I don't want to say suspicious because that sounds a bit pejorative, but the coincidence of timing of outreach. So there was a lot of outreach in January when LD 1820 was being considered, and then there hasn't been much since then. There were some ideas with a meeting that the faculty reps had with Trustee Riley and Trustee Rotondo at that time, and there was no follow-up. Now, after a lot of faculty pushback that we saw during citizens' comment at the last full board meeting, now there's outreach again. So what we're going to be looking for is much more sustained structural input. And what does that look like? And this 5-minute time period and then moving on because we have a quick agenda is not what we're looking for. So just to let you know that, we are also worried about the future of the Umaine system and that we want to engage with all of you directly, as well as engaging with system leadership. And one of our continuing concerns is the relationship between faculty and staff. And the Board of Trustees is always filtered through system. And I think that there's value and usefulness in that sometimes, but there also has to be some direct engagement, and that's our goal. But I would certainly allow Michael or William or Clyde or Patrick to add anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And let me just say, I'd like to give Trish a lot of credit. Trish, when she ran for chair, said one of the first things she wants to do is meet with the faculty reps. And that actually was before your speech on the floor of the last meeting. So I want to give that credit where it's due to Trish.
Lisa, may I?
Yes, of course.
I guess two Lisas. Appreciate those comments. We did talk about the fact that we put 5 minutes down. We'll stop doing that. We'll put a block of time there. We do that if there's no topics offered as sort of a placeholder, but recognize that it doesn't send a great message. So we'll put down, we can talk to you on what you think it should be, but 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, and you can use it if you want. Did have a conversation with both Trish and Lisa recently. I know they're very sincere about listening to you all and trying to have a discussion and a dialogue and not just updates. We recognize that just being listened or talked to is not the same thing as communication. So, and in the spirit of that, the faculty reps have asked if they could get during their time today an update on Mises. So it's sort of unusual, but a welcomed request. Certainly, if ever they have concerns, this would be a great time for them to use as well. So whenever you all are done with your additional comments, Joan is ready to give that update, and not just an update, but if you want to ask questions and have a dialogue with us.
Thank you, Robert. Anyone else from the faculty have anything they would like to share?
Hey folks, this is Patrick Cheek. I just want to thank Lisa for her advocacy and comments, as well as the openness of the board. I'm still learning the ropes as a BOT rep, so I would appreciate sort of any parameters or ideas in terms of how to best make use of this time in terms of the faculty and student discussion, especially as there's new committee chairs and people are kind of shuffling positions.
Robert, or Lisa, what would be the best advice we could give Patrick on sort of learning the ropes about his new position?
See, we went off mute at the same time.
You go.
We could do an orientation, certainly from our perspective. I think it would be good if the faculty reps would meet too, because I don't want to shape what they have in mind for your role. But we would certainly welcome the opportunity to meet with you.
So I would say I've been doing this even longer than Robert has, since 2016. You know, one of the things we're going to bring up when we meet with the chair and vice chair on Friday is back in, I want to say 2017, 2018, we revised the duties and responsibilities and the requests for system support for the faculty reps to do their job. So we have been looking at that internally, and certainly a summer kind of, and this was pre-COVID obviously, but a summer retreat where we would meet and maybe meet with some trustees, certainly meet with the chancellor and relevant vice chancellors to discuss things. And that has gone by the wayside, but I'll say it went by the wayside before COVID. It's not just because of COVID. The other thing I would say, I mean, and I've said this to Patrick as well, obviously we look at the minutes of and the agenda items to see if there's something there or if there's something we're specifically concerned about. In the past, I think the timing issue is because we didn't always have documents to submit for discussion beforehand. And when we did have something we wanted to talk about, documentation was requested. And that, to be frank, kind of, I felt was not as useful, because what happened is we gathered a lot of information, we submitted a bunch of documents, and the chancellor's office, because we had concerns about a policy change, and so the chancellor office had prepared kind of a rebuttal, and I felt like it wasn't really a good discussion with trustees again on the committee. So that's something I think, you know, a clean slate, we're all looking forward to move forward. You know, I think more conversations with us, Patrick, and you know, as we go live with board meetings, that we can meet on the Sunday afternoon live, and even if that doesn't happen, maybe more pre-meetings just among the reps like we had last week, because I think that was really useful. So.
Hey, Lisa, excuse, could I just, Ellen may have this, but that material you referenced, could you send it to Lisa and me before Friday?
Yeah, it's I'll put it in the chat. It's a policy it's a website. It's on the website, but I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just looping back, we did have that request for Joan to give an update on Mises.
Right.
It's not on
I was
the
just
agenda.
looking, we've got quite a few people here. I want to make sure I'm not missing a hand. All right, so I don't think I have. Speak up if I have.
So Lisa, I'll give you a quick tip that my students taught me. If someone puts their hand up, they'll automatically go to the top left-hand corner of your screen. So you'll watch, look at, I raise my hand and I go.
Perfect.
So you always, that's where anybody with their hand up will show up there. Unless they literally put their hand up.
Well, you're exactly right, and so is your student, because President Farini Mundy's hand is up and she's in the upper left-hand corner. So there we go. We all learned something today, although I imagine most of you already knew it. Let me turn the program over to Joan, if I might.
Thanks, Trustee Eames. Happy to give a brief update. First of all, thank you all for your patience as we made the decision at the last board meeting to defer the Mises item. And here are the reasons for that. And I didn't have the chance there to go into substantial detail, but there has been, since the beginning really of the work on the Maine College of Engineering, Computer and Information Science, there has been an incredibly large group of faculty and outside advisors, outside stakeholders working on a variety of topics relative to the development of Mises, 6 separate working groups. Those include undergraduate engineering, undergraduate computing, fundraising and outreach, organizational structure, the transition to Mises, and graduate education and research. And as it happened, the reports from those groups were just coming in right before the last board meeting. And some of them even came in afterward. And they are substantial. Every report is running 30 to 50 pages full of recommendations. Many wonderful recommendations for implementation, for how we can make Mises the very best that it can be for the system and for the individual universities and faculty and students that will be affected by it, how we can make a difference for the state. And so we are still digesting those recommendations, we being the steering committee of Mises, as well as others of us, of course, involved in the Alphon project. So right now, we're looking at kind of a recommendation map that's being assembled across all of the reports on several thematic areas: diversity, equity, and inclusion, pathways and on-ramps into Mises, expansion of undergraduate degrees and potentially new degrees, cross-campus issues, operational issues, outreach to pre-K through 12, both students and teachers. It's a very wonderful array of ideas. And we felt that it would be more appropriate to bring this resolution back to the board when we've been able to digest that information. So that's the reason, and the process is ongoing. I will also just add that there has been a search underway for the past several weeks for the inaugural dean of the new Maine College of Engineering and Computing and Information Science, a position that makes very clear that this is something that is in development, that will be built, and that a major responsibility of this new dean will be to work closely with faculty, students, and staff across the system to build this. So that is also in process, and we, I believe, are closing in on some finalists at this point in that search. That has been a very open process as well. So those are the updates. Robert, if others have questions or would like to know more, I'm happy to try to answer.
Thank you,
Anything
Joan.
else? Okay.
William
I
has
see
his hand up.
William, yeah.
So am I understanding this correctly, that after you look at those recommendations, something in addition to the MOU and the name change is likely going to come back through the ASA before it makes it up to the board?
That's an open and a good question, William. I don't know the answer. It'll depend upon what we see in those recommendations. We'll confer with the steering committee of Mises and others to decide if it's simply advancing the resolution as it's been, or if there's a change. And if there's a change, of course, then it comes back to ASA.
Okay.
But would you be willing to help us think about that? Because that's going to require some conferring with folks.
Yeah, and part of where that question was coming from was, I think it was the press release from the Board of Trustees said that the Mises was just being postponed till the July meeting. And so it just kind of struck me as weird. It was pulled, but there wasn't going to be any more dialogue or what that dialogue was. So I think I personally think it would be good to bring it to the ASA, even if there's going to be no change, simply as conveying the process so that people are clear, we're going to move forward with the MOU and the name change just as a simple information item here. And then everything else, any of those other recommendations can come through at a later point even. I think just for clarity of process.
Thanks for those observations. That's good. And again, board scheduling and so forth gets done with the chair and staff, and we need to read these reports. We need to see what they say.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yeah, I would just also add, and my colleague Matthew from USM isn't here, and I know there was a lot of feedback from USM folks, that what I'm hearing from faculty is, and I would say even myself, it's just not a good look to have it decided at a July meeting when faculty who are very invested in these changes, positively or negatively, when they are off contract, often traveling, doing research, and not able necessarily to attend the meeting. I'm not accusing anyone of any nefarious intent for having it in July. It just doesn't land well. So that's my 2 cents of maybe having it in September. Thanks. And I would love to accommodate many of my faculty up here in UMPI in September to come to the board meeting.
Fair enough. These are great observations, and obviously I'm listening carefully. And we'll see where we land, but I'm persuaded clearly that we need to be sure that everybody has the chance to provide their input and to have this conversation and to be a part of where we go. We want this to work. We all want this to work. And so how we make it work, I think, is still going to be an ongoing process. So thank you. And Lisa, really, I take your point about July. I think I might have once said July, but then I realized I don't get to say that. That's the chair who decides when we bring items forward. So trust me, I really appreciate these comments. And by virtue of the fact that Lisa spoke up, hopefully she'll be a part of helping me, helping us figure out how to look at what's already come in. In fact, if it would make sense, would like to open that up to all of our faculty reps. Maybe we have some conversation once we've started to digest this information.
Thank you. Anything else under the faculty rep discussion? Seeing nothing. Rosa, I think you had mentioned there wasn't any student rep discussion.
No, and we only have one student rep with us today, but I would welcome him. Tony Lewis is a new student rep from Umaine, and I think he's on today. So Tony, welcome. And we'll be seeing lots more of Tony in the year to come.
Thank you, Rosa.
Welcome, Tony.
Just one more thing, Chair Ames, thank you. Chair Riley, I did put the links in the chat to the responsibilities. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Then we will turn to tab 3. The proposed changes to Board of Trustee Policy 501, the student conduct policy. This is the second reading. And I'll turn the floor, I'm not quite sure, to Rosa to begin with. Okay.
Yep. Thank you. By the time we're done, you're all going to be able to recite every word of this. There will be a quiz. So good afternoon. As we discussed coming out of last year's review, there were several items within the procedures, otherwise known as the code itself, that needed to be discussed and improved. In addition, we gained valuable insight from our conversation with several engaged board members, many of whom are on the call today. Thank you so much. Over the summer and fall, which further illustrated for us the need to clarify and streamline our procedures and to make clear what was in fact policy and what is the student conduct process / procedures. Our student conduct officers have spent the last 11 months now working through every element of the implementation of the code, and the Student Conduct Review Committee, which includes faculty, students, and a trustee, contained within board policy, was convened to discuss the policy itself. As Lisa mentioned, today represents the second read of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, and the third opportunity for us to discuss with you the changes we're suggesting to the actual policy. Coming out of the first read by this committee, and I mentioned this at the board meeting, we have incorporated the suggestion from that discussion that the final approval of the student conduct code sit within a clear line of authority, in this case, the chancellor upon consultation with legal counsel. This change has been made within both the policy and the code. Coming out of last month's board meeting, a suggestion was made by Trustee Irwin related to the trustee role specific to the code procedure itself. And you will see that included within the final draft as well. I wanted to make sure that we took just a couple of minutes to address some concerns that were raised by a couple of our trustees who expressed concern that in the case of a serious sanction, such as an expulsion, students should have the benefit of legal counsel who can represent the student in any hearing, including the ability to cross-examine. In a student conduct hearing, a student can have the advisor of their choice, who can indeed be legal counsel, but the advisor cannot speak for them or cross-examine. However, they can be with the student, offer advice and questions to the student. They can help the student drafting an appeal, etc. We checked with NACWA, the National Association of College and University Attorneys, and ATICSA, the Association of Title IX Administrators, to determine what the practice was related to this question of an attorney's ability to cross-examine in a student conduct hearing. And I say that quite deliberately because this is separate from a Title IX, so student conduct hearing. No institution that we could identify or that we heard from allows this for many solid reasons. It doesn't affect the quality of the process. Attorneys can write their clients' opening statements, questions to ask the other party, and witnesses in closing statements. They can also write notes to their client, whisper in their ear, or take a break at any time to talk with their client. We have a well-developed appellate process that does a good job of catching and correcting the rare mistakes. Not allowing full attorney participation reduces the time and complexity of the process. It encourages more of our faculty and staff members to be a part of the process. There would be a need, and a critical need, for equal level of advocacy for other parties in the process. And the question of who would pay for such and how could it be realistically even feasible could be quite a challenge. Training for hearing board chairs and what would essentially amount to a full civil procedure, and how would we pay for this and support it? Again, these were items cited across the country as why nobody we could identify currently allows the cross-examination piece and the full participation piece in a student conduct hearing. Potential due process implications as a result of inconsistent representation, and obvious equity issues for students who might not be able to afford such representation. From a TICSA, if a process is too due process centric, court-like and formal, it will drive reporting of incidents down. The key is to provide enough due process without going overboard. This is a unique process. It is not a court, and there are good reasons why it is not. It thus needs a calibrated level of protections appropriate to the campus environment. To quote one authority, and I read this to you because I think it's particularly eloquent on how a student conduct case is very different from the kind of a normal civil procedure or even a Title IX case. So there's a noted authority who did quite a long piece on this, but I'm just going to read you a little bit, don't worry. This envisions a process which is calm rather than confrontational. It challenges us to achieve an atmosphere more consistent with the educational and academic setting in which it is occurring, as contrasted to the trial by combat behaviors often seen in courtroom proceedings. It is believed that this provides dignity for all students involved and that the finders of fact are enabled to do their job, resolving questions of credibility, determining whether institutional rules are violated, and if so, recommending sanctions to fit the misconduct and the institution's mission. This empowers the chair and the student conduct board to set the tone for the hearing. All questions are directed to all witnesses by or through the student conduct board, including questions that are in the nature of cross-examination. A final reminder for all of us as we review this proposal. Again, we are discussing the Student Conduct Code, which is not Title IX. Our policies related to Title IX, sex discrimination, sexual harassment, sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking and retaliation, and Title IX sexual harassment sit within a different policy, in our case, Policy 402. And trust me, I am sure we're going to be discussing Policy 402 later this year. On this question of legal representation, having the ability to cross-examine, legal counsel is afforded this opportunity within current Title IX policy. I want to briefly introduce the 6 key individuals who've been instrumental, and then I'm going to turn things over to Pat. Dave Fiacco, Director of Community Standards, Rights and Responsibilities, UM. You can raise your little hand. Erica Lamar, Director of Community Standards and Mediation, USM. I'm not sure Erica could be with us today. Nina Lavoie, Senior Associate General Counsel and Clery Compliance Coordinator for the University of Maine System. Donna Seppi, Director of Student Success Initiatives and the UMS Student Conduct Coordinator, UMS. So when you look at the policy and you see the UMS Student Conduct Coordinator, that's Donna. Eamon Purinton, Assistant General Counsel, UMS. And finally, Patricia Peard, our Interim General Counsel. Today represents a second read of the Student Conduct Policy, and it is an action item. We ask that all questions be held until the end, and I'm going to turn things over to Pat. And I'm actually going to share my screen for the PowerPoint. And Pat, it's all yours.
Thanks, Rosa. I'm actually gonna, Rosa's raised a big question that we need to get to, because I know there are trustees who want to discuss that issue. But I guess I'd like to direct our attention back for a moment to what we're actually asking of the committee And that is to get your approval of the policy that would be policy 501. And you can move forward, Rosa, in your, thanks, that's great. We're asking you to approve what will be the policy of 501. And in doing that, let's just remind ourselves that we would be separating out now the policy statement from the procedures for the student conduct code. And that is the underlying big issue here that we are bringing back again to the committee for your consideration. It's important, I will remind you, I did go over this at the full board meeting, but I just want to remind you that the purposes for this are efficiency and the ability for us to be flexible in dealing with this very important document, the Student Conduct Code procedures. We need to be able to make changes when it becomes clear to the Student Conduct Code officers. And you're going to hear from Dave Fiacco in a bit, who actually is one of these people who does this work, that as we go through the process and procedures, sometimes it becomes clear to us that in order to better serve our students, which is truly what this is all about, is the service to the students. And as Rosa said in some of the quotes that she read to you, this is a student-directed process that includes a fairly large element of education. Not people think of it as punishment, but in many cases, it is largely educational in nature. And so we need to be able to make changes to the procedures with greater ease than we currently have. The process that we have to go through now in order to change our procedures, as you know from being the ones in control of the process, is extremely complex. It takes a long time, and rightly so. We have to go through several readings and so on, and we would continue to go through that process if we were asking you to make changes to the policy itself. But that's the main reason that we need to do this. We want to be able to continuously improve this process. And I would say just another shorter side note about this. Most of the other board policies, if you look at them, are lined up this way in the sense that they separate the policy out from the procedures. And we're simply trying to align 501 with that. We have also, as Rosa pointed out, tried to address the concerns of some of the trustees with regard to how decisions will be made about changing the procedures. We have a final stage, which will involve, if there is not agreement among the Student Conduct Code officers about changes that may need to be made. If it's not in full agreement, anything that is contentious will go to the chancellor, and the chancellor, in consultation with general counsel, will make the final decision. So there is a final arbiter for the changes. And I think those are most of the things that we heard concerns about from the trustees, other than the big issue that Rosa raised, which is not really a policy issue at this point. But as we did at the open board meeting, we're going to highlight for you some of the changes that are in the code. You've been given a copy of the code. you're not asked to vote on that, but we've given it to you. And I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to my Associate General Counsel, Eamon Puritan, who's going to go over for you some of the changes that were made in the code itself. We're not trying to hide the ball here about changes we've made. So I'm going to ask Eamon if he can, and you can go to that slide, Rosa. Next one, I think. Yeah. So Eamon, it's all yours, buddy.
Okay. Thanks, Pat, and good afternoon, everybody. So the code is copied in your agenda. There were a lot of challenges with the current code in duplicate language, duplicate sections. And so a primary goal of editing it was to simplify it for any reader, but of course, specifically the conduct officers, students who are being subject to it. Simplicity is, I think, a key element to a student-centered approach to make sure that the language in the code is approachable and clear and concise. So a couple examples of that, several different sections of the code talked about panel members' conflicts of interest. We consolidated that to one clear section on the standards for conflict of interest. Another example of that was an administrative resolution process and a conduct officer hearing process in our current existing code, two separate paths that disciplinary actions can go down, but to the readers, they're quite similar in process and kind of confusing, frankly, to implement. So the current iteration, what we're trying to achieve is a more streamlined process for students and conduct officers to go through. One substantive change was the elimination of the presidential appeal level, which is a second level of appeal currently afforded to students. It was removed based on some significant concerns with having presidents of our campuses directly involved in student conduct cases. And so, again, that kind of streamlines the process. And it also, frankly, makes it quicker to reach resolution. Definitions are key in a complex document like this to have clarity and complete definition. So we really went through the definition section pretty robustly, making sure that the definitions were clear and all the terms were accurately defined. So those are just some examples of the goals that we were trying to achieve with the current draft that you have in your agenda. And I think next up is Dave Fiacco, who is a conduct officer at Umaine and can speak more directly to the challenges of implementing our current code.
Thanks, Eamon. Appreciate it. As Eamon mentioned, I've been a student conduct officer here in the University of Maine system for 21 years, going on 21 years. Have in my time here at Umaine managed in excess of 10,000 cases, which is a kind of a surprising number to me. Gone through a number of iterations of the conduct code. I'm sure Nina has a similar stack every 3 years, and often more frequently than 3 years, we have to go through the code because of the creeping legalism. There's a lot of legal issues that come up in the student conduct process, and we have to modify our code, modify our process to account for case law and other matters that we need to account for. So we really need to have the flexibility, the ability to be nimble and make some changes to our code so that we're affording the greatest level of fundamental fairness that we can possibly achieve given our system. As you've heard before, this is an educational process. It's not intended to be punitive. The criminal justice system is really designed for that, where our system is in fact designed to be educational. It's a student-centered process. We encourage students to advocate for themselves with the assistance of advocates themselves, whether they be lawyers or parents or other folks that might be supporting them. I can assure you that the experience of the conduct officers, myself, Erica Lamar, James Salidas, very skilled individuals, certainly have the students' education in mind. Nobody is looking to really be punitive. We just want to develop good citizens so that as students leave the University of Maine and move out into their communities, they have an understanding of how they need to manage their affairs as good citizens and representatives of the University of Maine and the University of Maine system. We have constant contact with General Counsel's office. I call Eamon regularly. I call Nina regularly, really just to kind of check my thinking. And I know Erica and James do the same. We try to stay current as we're able through the various organizations that we're involved in, but we do want to make sure that decisions that we're making, adjustments that we may make are legally defensible, certainly have every element of fundamental fairness infused into them. So we're constantly checking with General Counsel to make sure that we're doing just that. So those are just a few of the reasons that I really strongly recommend you approve this policy, recognizing that the policy and the procedures have been separated for just that reason. It really will give us the flexibility to do our jobs much more effectively and without the adversarial nature of the code as it has developed over the years. So that's really all I've got to say about that, and we'll turn it back to Rosa.
Thanks, Dave. And now we can open it up to questions.
Rosa, I think Barbara had a question for you.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you very much. I realize I'm not a voting member for this meeting, but I prepared as if I was going to be. So I was
training.
Yeah, indeed. So my focus was on the policy document, which I understand is the one before the committee. And by the way, I certainly support the divergence of way in which you've handled the policy and the actual more detailed procedure for implementation. But my question had to do, I'm looking at page 2 of 2, and I'm looking at the training sentences. I do a lot of work looking at retail electric suppliers who've violated state consumer protection laws. And one of their key excuses is, my third-party contractor is responsible for training, and they said they do it. So I'm looking here at two things. One is, who are the people, who are the persons responsible? There may need to be a reference to the category or the content somewhere as to who those are. And the second concern is, they, quote, will receive training, but there's no requirement that they have certified their acknowledgement of having received the training. And those two things are things that I think for future concerns that would be good to address. Thank you.
Donna, would you like Donna and, oh, actually, Pat, you go for it. You're on mute.
I would be happy to bow to Donna. I was just going to say, thank you for that question, because trust me, all of the people on this call agree with you that training is a critical issue. And one of the things I'll just point to you for you that I think may help and give some reassurance, Trustee Alexander, is that we have now joined a SUNY student program that's excellent. They are being joined by literally dozens and dozens of colleges and universities. And one of the things that they do, which is wonderful, is they provide training in almost every area where we need to have our folks trained. And I'm not just talking about the student conduct code, but other areas as well, including academic dishonesty, various other areas. And when we pay our fee to join them, we are not limited at all in how many people can take the training. And it's excellent training. And they are great because they also, in terms of keeping track, they keep a record of everybody who is trained. So in that sense, we have a certification of who has and who has not participated. So we're pretty excited about this because it will be less haphazard than it's been in the past. And frankly, one of our other problems has been that it's very expensive in some instances to get the training that our people need. And this time, under this system, once we've paid our fee for the year, we don't pay for every single person that goes in. So it is it's better training, and we don't have to be sitting there counting heads and seeing if the budget is running out to train people. So I, for one, am thrilled that we made this change. And I think it's going to really help make sure that we are, in fact, training all the people that we need to train, which, trust me, is a considerable number of people. So that's one, I think, important answer to your question. And Donna, I'm happy to, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to, don't have a ton to add to that. I think what I'd like to add is that the nice thing about, just to go back on the SUNY opportunity that we just looked at, is again, we were looking at flexibility, training, and the laws that are consistently changing. So a few of those would be Clery, VAWA, Title IX. There's all kinds of case law out there that, and all of these impact, as you've heard, all these impact what we are required to do. So, and who is required? So it goes back to that all persons issue. We were trying to figure out, how do we embrace an ongoing change of people that have a role and a responsibility based on whatever policy, law, or case law comes down the pike. So that's why we put all persons. That is ever changing. It could be and their role changes. It could be an appeal person. It could be a student in an initial hearing. It could be the type of hearing. So making sure they understand issues around academic integrity are different than those around assault. So again, the content and the topic areas are vastly different, and who is responsible for, participating in their role is constantly changing. So having in a policy how to embrace that in, one sort of phrase. We could write, faculty, staff, and students. But then, what happens if something comes down the pike and we have an external person that has to be trained in an area? Because sometimes students choose their advisor from an external entity. It could be an advocacy group. Maybe it's an attorney and they're trained in their own right for their own things, but there are some advocacy folks externally that may want some additional support or assistance in an area. And so again, would they be able to support that person, and what obligation, if any, do we have to do that? So just wanted to follow up on why we used all persons, and to just solidify what Pat had already said, that I do think the SCI training allows us way more flexibility, not only in the content of the topics, but also allowing us to train people all year long. If we have changes in personnel or student availability or staff availability to be participating in a hearing, we will now have, we at the tip of a finger be able to provide somebody with some training and access online that will be able to document and have that for us should we need that.
Thanks, Donna.
If I could just respond, the issue here is the persons responsible for oversight and administration. So those are the higher level training that you're obligating to perform with this written document you want the board to approve.
Mhm.
And that's the level of vagueness that I found of concern. Plus the issue of documenting that those people have actually received and participated in the training. So there's a level of training that will occur at the high implementation phase. And then there's all kinds of ongoing training for general faculty, for general student advisors who are potentially involved in this process in the future. So I do understand that distinction, and I don't think the answer answered my concern, but I will leave that to the other board members to talk about.
Roger, go ahead.
Now, okay, just follow up on what Barbara just said, and maybe if I could ask Barbara, what I understand what you're saying, and I find it persuasive. What kind of do you have an idea for what kind of language would be appropriate to make sure that that happens?
Is there a definition of those who are responsible for oversight and administration in the UMS system? Is there some job description that is easily identifiable as meeting that criteria? So that's a question. And if it isn't, then maybe we need to have something like as identified by the chancellor or something like that in the language here. And then the second concern can easily be met with some language that would say something like, will receive and provide evidence of having received the training.
Pat, did you want to address Barbara's concerns?
Well, I'm sorry. I thought I had addressed most of them, but clearly I did not. So Donna, whom you just heard from, oversees overall that people are getting the training that they are supposed to get. My office, that is the Office of the General Counsel, is also involved in helping with that. And we, for instance, participated with Donna in seeing that all of our presidents were trained this year. So we are dealing with the upper level issue of training, because one of the things that our policy, not this policy, but our training says is that our presidents will be trained. In other words, all the way down, we're having people trained. If we need to have more precise language, I don't think any of us would object to that. I think we're doing it. But if more precise language would be helpful, I can't imagine that any of us would object to that.
Well, and your suggestions make that much easier. So thank you for those.
If I might just add as well, in the procedural document, there's a little more of an expanded requirement and a little more expanded granular information around the training that our teams receive. And that includes conduct officers, as well as administrators who participate. And so that is in the procedural piece. So we don't want to leave that out. It is more granular, the procedural and the process of how some of that occurs. But there was some intentionality in terms of the policy, because we wouldn't necessarily need to update that as often, but we do have those pieces specifically, including topic areas that we do train in that are required as well. So, maybe there's a way to create a little bit more granularity to highlight what you're asking in the policy. And there is more of that in the procedures for sure.
Rosa or Donna, if you had any questions or want to to work with Barbara a little more on this, who should she reach out to?
You can reach out to
To you,
probably
Rosa.
You can reach out to me. Yep. No,
Okay.
yep. No, appreciate the comment, and I think we can clarify that. And again, Barbara, your comments, your suggestions I think that makes it a lot clearer. So we can easily figure that out.
Thank you.
No, really appreciate you doing it when it wasn't part of your assignment yet. Good job.
I'm trying to determine if Pat and or Roger still have their hands up. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I'll put mine back up, please. Thanks. This is just a comment and not a question. First of all, the amount of work that's gone into this by staff is extraordinary, and I, as one board member, really appreciate it. And I have certainly learned a lot. And just from my perspective, I'm certainly supportive of having a policy that's under the general purview of the board, and then procedures which are handled in a different way, and the chancellor being the final arbiter of that. I had a different view of one part of this. I'm just going to be very quick and say it for those who haven't heard it, and for those of you who have and are sick of hearing it, I'll be brief. My view of the due process issue is different from, I think, most within the system, and probably the majority of our colleagues and the trustees, and certainly different from the way most colleges and universities handle this. And it has to do, I think, in part with a couple people mentioned about whether this is viewed as an educational policy or a punitive policy or area of life. And I think that if you're getting expelled from a university, it's hard to view that as an educational process and instead of a punitive process for all the implications that can have for somebody's life. And I just want to talk about two theoretical students. One, John Smith, who is charged with sexual harassment, and a second student, Sarah Jones, who is charged, if you will, with arson. Both of them facing expulsion if the fact finder determines that yes, they did it. In John Smith's case, because it's a Title IX case where federal rules tell us how we have to do it, John Smith, again, facing expulsion, has the right to have not only the presence of an attorney if he chooses, but also the real participation of an attorney, including the ability to cross-examine witnesses. Sarah Jones, who is, again, accused, if you will, of arson, does not have that ability. She has the opportunity to have a lawyer sit next to her and whisper in her ear, which I can assure you is a very unhelpful kind of process. Each of them will face expulsion if they're found to have done the act. And those are two very different views of due process. For John Smith in the Title IX case, the view is that the presence of an attorney in such a serious matter where there's such serious life consequences, that the presence of attorney can help to get to the truth, to make sure that if John Smith sexually harassed someone, he will get expelled. In the other case, there isn't that kind of due process. And I think what we're really trying to get to is the truth. And it's a fundamental divergence of opinion about whether the active participation of a lawyer is helpful in getting to the truth or is unhelpful in getting to the truth. I'm of the view that attorneys are generally helpful in getting to the truth, and that cross-examination, if done well and in an unintimidating way, is the single most important tool in getting to that truth. So that's why I've been a little bit outspoken on that particular issue. I realize that's not the issue before us right now. It's just whether we're going to have a policy and procedures. I'm fully supportive of that, but I just wanted to explain again where I was coming from, and I appreciate the time. Thanks, Lisa.
Donna?
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you very much for sharing those examples, because in all the months, honestly, in full transparency, in all the months I've heard your concerns, I've certainly heard them and understood them, and from a very different perspective. So having those examples, I think, while it doesn't necessarily change my perspective on how I think we should be operating, right? I do have a very different understanding of why you have, with such passion and persistence, continued to share that thought. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Are there other comments? Well, I want to take the opportunity not only to thank Roger and Beth and Donna and Rosa and Eamon and David. I mean, this issue has been, and Nina, this issue has really generated, I think, wonderful discussion. Roger's right, that's not the issue that's before us today, but as a result of Roger raising this, a lot of work has been done. I know, Rosa, you did a tremendous amount of digging around the country. So thank you to everyone for sharing their perspectives and sharing just where they sit on this. Not often do issues get vetted quite as thoroughly as this one, perhaps, is what I'm trying to say. If I don't see any other hands following Lisa Ledoux's very good advice here. I see no other hands across the top. And so I'm going to read the text of the proposed resolution. And that is that the Academic and Student Affairs Committee.
Ames?
Yes.
Before you go to the resolution, I have a question for Rosa. Because there was a recommended amendment to the language in the policy, should this be a resolution that is amended? My question.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking the exact same thing, Ellen. I think all we'd have to do, and I bet you're thinking the same thing, is just add as amended, because what we'll need to do coming out of this meeting, and I don't think we're adding lots of words, we're just adding some clarifying words. So yeah, that way we can move forward. It'll get, between now and the board meeting, we'll figure out those added words and we should be good to go.
Okay, I'm fine with that too. So Lisa, we'll just have as amended on the resolution, and then when it's presented to the full board in July, it will have that language embedded into it.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. I'll read the text of the resolution. That the Academic and Student Affairs Committee approves this item to be forwarded to the July 11th, 2022 Board of Trustees meeting for approval of the following resolution, which will be amended. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee as amended and approves the proposed changes to Board of Trustees Policy 501, Student Conduct Policy, to go into effect August 1, 2022. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Emily Kane. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mike Mishu. Ellen, would you please take the roll?
Trustee Kane.
Yes.
Trustee Dobson.
No. Do you hear me?
Yes, that was a no, correct?
Correct.
Trustee Ames.
Yes.
Trustee Cates.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Mishu.
Yes.
I don't believe Trustee Riley is back. The motion is not carried.
How many trustees just voted, Ellen?
6.
And
Oh,
how-
sorry, it would be carried. Correct. There
Thank
was a
you.
quorum present.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah, we only had one vote no. I was like, huh?
Okay. So we had 5 votes in the affirmative and 1 in the negative. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And the motion carries.
It does.
Thank you. Okay.
Trustee Marchese,
Yes, ma'am. Beth.
would you mind if I spend a minute or two to say what my reasons are for voting no?
That's absolutely fine.
I agree with Attorney Cates that these cases, especially the more serious ones, whether under Student Code of Conduct or Title IX, should require an attorney. And I also have looked at some cases that say, yes, that in cases with serious consequences, an attorney and the right to cross-examine would be appropriate. And some of those were shared with us when we were having this discussion much earlier. And I think that whether all the other universities are doing it in all cases or no cases is not relevant. We need to decide what's best in our system. And I think that having the board make that determination and not the administration making that determination is the right way to go, and that it should be part of the policy and not just the rules pursuant to which the policy is implemented. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that to us. Appreciate it. Any other comments? All right, and I think I've been trained that there is no motion or vote needed to adjourn. So thank you all very much. And we will see you in July. July, what is it? What, 13th, Ellen?
July 11th.
Excuse me, July 11th.